Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to the Read Cohort, August 2023. The fire season's starting to pick up now. So, it's been real slow so far. We've got Sam Amito who's going to talk to us today about WFDSS and the NextGen WFDSS, the changes that are happening. Sam, if you want to give yourself a bigger introduction and share your screen. Great. Go.
Oh, yeah, just a short introduction. So Sam Amato, I work
I'll be right there in a moment, Elijah.
I work for the WFM RDNA.
It's muted.
I'm sorry I killed it, but I'm spacing out.
Hey, a few people have their mics open. If you could mute while Sam's giving his talk. Go ahead, Sam. Sam, I think you're muted.
Oh, there you go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things with WFDSS NextGen is that we're going to be required to go through FAMAuth to go ahead and do authentication. That's not going to be done locally in the application anymore. All the applications are going to FAMAuth. If you've ever used WFDSS, it's already using FAMAuth. It's pretty straightforward, easy to do. If you're a government employee, you just go through the e-authenticate. This is the production version, so I'll switch over to the other one here in a second. But you'll be prompted to go through picking your agency, and I want to save it. And then if you've used Mobile Link, or you can use your PIV card to get into the application. So this is the QA version because we mostly have development environments set up right now. So I'm going to walk you guys through what it would look like once you're getting into production. You'd see a tile similar to this one here. This is the development environment. And once you click on that, it would open the user interface for WFDSS NextGen. So similar to WFDSS Classic, when you guys request access, you're going to be added as a viewer into WFDSS. And in order to give people quick access to their geographic area editors, you would access that list of people here with this GAE staff report, which there's nobody in dev that's a GAE right now, but this list would be populated and you'd be able to call or email whoever you need to get further roles. And one enhancement we're doing in NextGen, especially for Department of Interior folks, is you can add multiple agency and geographic area combinations so that folks can find you more easily. And you'll be able to do up to 15 of those. So one key difference in WFDSS NextGen versus Classic is in WFDSS Classic, you dump into the main page and you will find your incident with a filter. Almost everything in WFDSS NextGen is related to the map. From the time you click on this incidents tab all the way through approving a decision, you don't have to leave the map. And that's because we get so much of our information from the map, just makes the user workflow much smoother by not having to leave the map. And we borrowed some functionality from WFDSS here, and you can actually expand the right-hand panel and you can shrink the right-hand panel, but the map never technically goes away. So your session is always current. This view and the list on the right-hand side is going to be constrained by your view. So if you were on the Arapahoe Roosevelt, which is near where I sit, and you were to zoom in, this list is sorted and constrained by what's in your current map view. So this is how we're going to find fires, is mostly based on location. You can search by a name if you wanted to, if it was somewhere in your map view, but there's a lot of fires and you can't find it, you could search by name. And if you click on those guys, you can click it to watch it, and I'll show you guys that functionality later. This adds it to your watch list. And then if that is the fire that you wanted to do, you would click through view, and then initiate record is what starts a decision. So as a read, you're probably coming in after a decision's been started, and I'll walk you through that here in a second. So this is your My Home page. This is kind of a shortcut to everywhere you need to be. So the My Incident Watch List, those are those little eyeballs I showed you. So here's the bear fire in my list. And any decisions you're participating in, like an incident editor, those are here in My Active Incidents. I've already started this incident, so we'll look through this crystal fire. This is really where reads are going to come into play, is here in the incident info, we have a spatial inventory, which in WFDSS Classic is equivalent to the values inventory. And what we're doing to get information to line officers more quickly is we're auto-generating this planning area, which is this purple square here. And then we're able to go out and hit some of these services and products available as a service right off the bat based on that planning area. So this is running a planning area right now. You've got these two here. I've got this current planning area, and I've got a default planning area. This one might be a little slow. Let me jump out to show you guys a different one. And I apologize for the application, but this is actually our development environment. So could be a couple hiccups in here. So for those of you who have used WFDSS before, this will look very familiar. This is basically the same values inventory that you get in WFDSS Classic. We show you the layers that failed. One of the reasons we do that is that a lot less of our layers, almost none of our layers, are stored internally to the application. These are all being pulled in via services. So this is the most current, up to the minute available national risk assessment layer. This is the most current snag hazard layer. And then the layers with no data, of course, in here, so that you can understand, you know, if you're just missing data in those layers or if they failed. And then you're able to download this values inventory into a CSV by clicking this export button. So this would be probably the first place you'd stop as a read to see if there are layers of concern in here that you would want to look through and make sure you consult with your line officer on. Most of these layers, well, all these layers are available in the map, of course. We've added quite a few more layers than WFDSS Classic has because it's a little bit more challenging to add map layers into WFDSS Classic. Some of the RMA layers are available in here, like suppression difficulty index, potential control line. And then we also added a bunch of the risk assessment layers as well. So there's a lot of natural and cultural resource layers in here. This is mostly airshed stuff. Resource management considerations are things like aquatic retardant avoidance, terrestrial retardant avoidance. And again, these layers are owned by the producers of these services. So if you see data that's missing, you would want to go to those service providers to get that data updated. And as soon as they update it, you would be able to see that updated data in the UI. So I'm going to turn off some of this stuff so my map behaves itself. All right, any questions so far? Okay. Next step in the process that we've lined out here on top, and really all we did with this stepper is we took the risk-informed decision process that's on the WFDSS homepage, and we kind of stepped the user through it. So that's deployed there on the top of the map, and we call that the stepper. And so after you've looked at your incident, you've looked at your values inventory, maybe you've looked at the weather, the next step is to go into relative risk. And the relative risk that's in WFDSS now is based on the PMS 236. So this pretty much follows it exactly. We will have some data in here to inform some of these data elements, like time of season. We're gonna be bringing in Matt Jolly's end of season chart. Barriers to fire spread, we might give you an analysis of land fire data that's within your planning area. I'll just show you that right now. So if you were curious about fuels, you don't have to be an analyst to view the fuels anymore. You can actually just view the land fire data service that's available. So this is the most current land fire data layer that's available. This is the 40 fuel model. And you can also look at some other things in here like existing veg, biophysical setting. Land fire has a lot more data than this available. We've kept this layer list pretty short to keep the map performant. Okay, so after the line officer fills out this relative risk, which this is probably going to be the bulk of where the read has input into an early part of a decision, right? Filling out some of these infrastructure and natural cultural resource concerns. This would be mostly informed by your map, but only if those layers are available in WFDSS as a service. Otherwise, you would have to maybe do some map captures or images and hand those off, and then those could be pasted into the narrative here. This will populate the relative risk rating table, this is just a summary of what I have up above, just for reference. And all we've done with the PMS 236 is we highlight the tally. So this is verbiage from the PMS 236. And then the line officer can agree or disagree with that and write out a narrative. Once they click this ready for publication and save it, it'll populate that relative risk rating in the organization assessment, which this is one of the data points for org assessment. And this is actually the CIMT version of the PMS 236. So we do also have the Part D in here for the command, planning, ops, and finance and logistics. And so again, if you were going to be filling this out for real, you'd have to populate all these values, and it would give you a results table. Any questions so far? If not, I'm going to jump into some wireframes and some stuff that we haven't quite built yet, but it's the next step in the decision, which is the strategy assessment. But real quick before I go on, are there any questions? Okay. The next step after you fill out your relative risk is to assess your strategy. And so in current gen WFDSS, we do this with objectives and requirements. And you might do some MAPs. This is changing up a little bit in WFDSS NextGen in that we're going to give you more shapes that you can use to develop those assessments, and we're also going to let you categorize those. So some of the categories that you could give are beyond just incident objective and incident requirement. We're going to let you tag those as protection objectives, safety concerns, and then any of the concerns that you might have in a relative risk. So an infrastructure or natural cultural concern, or maybe it's a social economic concern, or a catch-all other resource concern. And real quick right here, Wes, do you want to speak to that that layer that we might be bringing in, the other resource layer?
I have to find my mute, but sorry about that.
There you go.
Yeah. So, yeah, and there's other potential layers we'll be bringing in. There's some, I know there's a data standard out there on the geospatial world for kind of a read assessment layer, and ideally that would go into that feature layers drop down, right? So it would allow whoever's driving the WFDS or the agency administrator doing the WFDS to be able to view what the read has collected, throughout the field during the life of the incident, and be able to actually assess stuff that may not be captured in some of these other data layer types, such as, the fire level planning, that would be the subunit overlapping shapes, or any of the other unit shape data that maybe the forest or district uploaded pre-season, its ability to bring in data that's real for that incident. So we're hoping to connect to that once that service is, through its data standard review and up and running.
Thanks, Wes. Yeah, this would allow the read to have some real input. This is kind of the meat of how you would want line officers or AAs, or really the IMTs, to address various resource concerns. So you'd be able to add map captures in here if your layers are available in the map. You could insert images into your narrative if you needed to do that. And then you would save those, and they populate a list of strategic assessments down here, which is basically analogous to your incident objectives and requirements. And the reason for that name change will become evident here in a second. Then you can sort those based on category, date edited, and you'll be able to prioritize those at a list, just like you can reorder them in WFDSS Classic. And then, of course, you have to choose whether they're going to be in the decision or not. If they've never been used in a decision, you will still be able to delete those. And then what we've done is we have added another tab here, which ties into the ISAP process. And that's the ability to tag some of those strategic assessments as critical values at risk. And so once you've tagged that as a critical value at risk, then you could come in here, categorize that, the severity of the impact, the probability of impact, and then you would get a risk rating, and you would also be able to categorize it based on why it's at risk. And that will populate the table that would then be downloadable in a CSV format if you wanted it that way, but also included in your decision. So this is an optional part of your decision. You don't have to do this if it's a very small, not complex fire. But if you're in a large, long duration fire, it's likely line officers are going to be using this. And based on read input, they may be tagging those as a critical value at risk in their decision. Any questions on that part before I go to the strategy course of action?
Yeah, Sam, this is Lynn. I have a question.
Sure.
So, is there any, currently, we do all the WFDSS, but it in no way links to field maps or anything that the firefighters on the line are using. So while it does get used by the upper level IMT and ICP and SOPLs and strategic operations. Is there any plan of having some of this better linked with things on the fire line in field maps?
As far as field maps go, I'm assuming you mean the layers that the GSS is using, correct? So some of the NIFS layers, is that what you're referring to?
Correct. Yeah.
So we do actually tie into some of those layers for the NIFS, and it would be a matter of just adding some of those layers. So here in the incident, national incident reference, we have things like drop points, div and branch breaks, active fire edge. So it'd be just a matter of adding those layers as long as they're available in NIFS as a service, and the GISS is updating those. They could be pulled in here.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering about the other way around. Things that are put into WFDSS being pulled into
Yes.
NIFS.
That's also true. So the things that are in WFDSS, though, we have to work out how that service is going to work. There's definitely going to be a service with everything that gets published and approved going into a service, so that they can be picked up in other applications. But how we work with draft information, we need to figure that out, and how you might access that, because there would be utility in accessing some of these draft planning areas and draft strategic assessments, but we need to work out how that would work, how you would authenticate in there, and how we would control access to that data, because that's not something that we want publicly accessible as far as draft work goes. Now, published decisions, that should be publicly accessible because they're published. So yes, is the answer to your question. Stuff from WFDSS will be coming out of the application and going into a service and available to consume.
Great, thanks.
Okay, now I'll jump into the course of action part. So currently in WFDSS, you outline a course of action, but there has been some consternation where the course of action in WFDSS does not match, the management direction that's being outlined in the 209 or other sources. And so the direction that we're progressing in is WFDSS is going to be the authoritative data source for management direction on a wildland fire. And in order to do that, we have to align ourselves with some of the other systems that report management direction. And one of the ways we're going to do that is we are going to allow people to line out their strategy, their 209 strategy in WFDSS. It won't be mandatory. You can mark your strategy as not defined should you choose to. But if you are reporting decisions from WFDSS, the plan is to eventually have your strategy coming from WFDSS and being reported to 209. And that would come in the breakdown of how your strategy is outlined. And so what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to pick from a list of feature layers. So you could pick the planning area, you could use pods, maybe you want to draw a shape, or you could use your spatial fire planning data. And I want to leave enough time at the end of this to have Wes go through some spatial fire planning. So we'll get to that in a second, but you could use any of your spatial fire planning data, select that shape, add it to your map, pick a strategy to implement, and then go ahead and attach some details to that as far as how you're going to manage your fire. So basically what this will do will populate a list of shapes that you have attached to your fire. So on a smaller fire, it might look something similar to this, or, you know, theoretically, you could have your entire planning area just be one strategy if you just want to assign it directly to your planning area. So you will have your choice between, let me go up here and show you guys the 209 strategies. Oh, we don't have the full list. But it's basically full suppression, confine, contain, point protection, monitor, and then not defined as your final option. And then you'd be able to drag those strategies up and down. So your shapes that you bring into your map could overlap initially. And then the order that you put them in the list will determine how those strategies are implemented on the landscape, and will eventually be cookie cuttering everything out so that you have those shapes burned into the map. So if you were to draw a shape on top of here, you'd have it burned into your map, and you'd be able to define what you were going to do in that particular shape. So once you go through that process, which will look a lot like this, you'll have a list of strategies that are included in the decision. And this is a real simple process. You're just saying exactly what you're going to do in a particular shape. Then you will go to the next step, which is shape by shape. You're going to line out exactly what you plan on doing within that shape. What's your course of action associated with that strategy? Are there some constraints? Why are you implementing it? And what does success look like? Once you're all done with those, lining out the details for each strategy, you can mark it ready for publication, which this is our check-in, check-out process in WFDSS NextGen. Is by marking stuff ready for publication, you're basically locking that part of the decision. And once you finish lining out all your strategies, you'll be able to see a summary of your strategy here. And you can go back and forth. You're not precluded from, you know, maybe as you go through your details, you decide you want to attach a different shape to that strategy. You can do that. Once you're done with that part, you would proceed on to the rationale. So you would insert your cost information here. You'll put in your agency admin rationale, which is just for the entire decision, you know, what your decision is. Are there cooperators? Here's where you would address your critical values at risk and your protection objective. And then you would move on to current fire situation and maybe some triggers that would prompt you to update the decision. And then here at the end, we just have some last check boxes to go through before you approve the decision, which is, you know, I've reviewed the incident tactics, they're consistent with my strategy, and then you have a choice to do either suppression only wildfire or whether this is multiple objectives. And this part is just coming compliant with the Dingle Act and some agency policy for the Forest Service. I'm not sure if this will become a DOI requirement as well. Any questions there before I go on? Okay. So last thing before an AA goes through their approval process, they would have a validation here. They would see that all the portions of their decision are checked in, they're ready to publish. Once they do that, they can click the approve decision button. And when you do a periodic assessment from now on, this is also where you will be doing that. So you would be updating, we'd be pulling in new updated real-time data to tell you if any of these components have been updated or if there's been a change in your cost. I'm not sure how many of you have seen the incident timeline before, but this is tied to Irwin data. And so it's a real-time kind of tracker of where your cost is, where your resources are at, how big your fire has gotten. And it's a fast, easy way to check on the metrics on your fire and make sure that you're being successful in what you set out to do. If that all looks good, you can update your decision. Couple other tools in here that I'm not sure Reeds would really care about, but just for your knowledge, there's a list of decisions. This is where you would go to look at old decisions that were previously published. And we're also including an area where AAs can come in here and log information on a daily basis. This would only be available to the AA or line officer / approver. And it's simply for handing this off to other AAs if it exceeds their authority. Or they just time out on days off. And at this point, I kind of want to do a quick go back, and I want to go back to the fire planning language, because spatial fire planning, for those of you that are data managers in WFDSS, is actually coming out of the application. And that is being moved to a tool called the Spatial Fire Planning Service that Wes and Susan and others have set up for us. And it's going to be a pretty awesome way of managing your fire planning data. So with that, Wes, do you want to talk a little bit about that spatial fire planning data?
Yeah, I'll fill the screen for just a minute.
You bet.
So right now, this is the homepage for the Spatial Fire Planning Service. We are currently publishing view-only data out of WFDSS Classic, as WFDSS Classic remains to be the authoritative source for fire planning information. But prior to moving to production with NextGen WFDSS, we still have a transition phase to where folks will come to the Spatial Fire Planning Service. This page may look a little different, but this page
I don't see your screen.
Got a good little haul, don't we?
Now it's up.
Yep, you can see it now.
And if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
How about now? Can you guys hear me?
Yep, now we can.
Sorry about that. So this is the view-only service. This is through an AGL dashboard through the NIFC org. So you'll have to have a NIFC account to be able to view this information. But everything's hosted through NIFC. The service is through NIFC. The service can be added to other applications and for other use. You can use it in ARC Pro if you want to view the data there. But we do have this view-only dashboard where you can come in and see the data as it's sitting in WFDSS Classic and translating over into the service. It's functioned through a series of filters on the top. I can start with filtering by my GAC, which kind of just zooms you to the area of your interest where you're located. And then you can filter by your unit. If you know your unit's identifier, you can search for it. We're going to come down here to the Lincoln National Forest because that's where I'm at. You see my little forest down here. And then you got your shape categories. These are the old shape names coming out of WFDSS Classic. So if I did strategic objectives, it would show the strategic objectives for the forest. And it also shows the new shape type that'll be translating to, which would be subunit non-overlapping shapes. So you see I have 3 different strategic objectives for this forest. And if I click on those objectives, it'll actually show that related fire planning language down here at the bottom. You do have to use a scroll bar. There's no way to wrap the text. So you have to use a scroll bar to read it, or you can download the language into a CSV and look at it that way. You can also reset your filters if you want and come back and say, okay, I saw those. Now I want to look at my management requirements. I want to key into the wilderness areas. And same thing, it'll filter your data and it'll show you just the information associated with these shapes. So that's just a kind of quick tutorial on how to use the dashboard. I'll add this link to the Spatial Fire Planning Service to the chat. Actually, no, I won't, because I don't have access to it. Sam, do you have access to the chat?
I think so.
Okay, I'll send it to you.
Let me try and put the link in. I've got that. I've got the dashboard right here. This isn't the public dashboard, but I think there's a link to the, or sorry, this is the public dashboard, and I think you can link to the actual NIFC dashboard from here. Is that the one you wanted in there, Wes?
That's the story map. The story map's embedded in the experience builder. I just sent you a link if you want to post it in.
Oh, sure.
We will be, over the next few months, reaching out to forests that have orphan data. So this will be data that's either missing the spatial tied to the language or the language tied to the spatial. Those will fall under these two tabs, and we'll work with each unit individually to remedy any of the issues prior to going to launch. And then we're also publishing another unit shape feature service that's kind of a standalone service, and that can be accessed here. And then for the published edit views, when those become available, those you'll get to here. So you can change your categories, do a language update, change your shapes, or change your other unit shapes right here. And that's what I got to demo. If there's questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll get back to you, Sam.
Well, just one thing I wanted to say about this spatial fire planning service that you guys have set up, which is pretty awesome, I think. So this is going to make life really easy for the field because you guys are no longer constrained by the schedule for the RDNA and our limited resources to update your data. This is now back in the hands of the field, and you can update this whenever you feel like you need to. And then, Wes, can you talk about the permissions and how that's been set up so that each unit has control over their data?
Yeah, so we're actually still working through the actual permissions, and they will vary by agency. DOI is going to vary a little bit differently than the Forest Service, and how folks will initiate language and shape edits or updates and get those approved through whomever up the chain wants to be the ultimate approver. But basically, the unit level folks, even the subunit level folks, if it goes down to the district or the field office, they can edit their data on the fly as needed, and then that would get basically flagged in the service and pushed up to the next level. And whoever is the authority figure for that agency would be able to actually turn the flag to make it available to be viewed in the service and used in decisions. Pretty standard. It's kind of mirroring the pod approval process. If you're familiar with the pod data standard, also it mirrors the NIFs and the structure assessment layer that they have in the NIFs for that approval process. So it'll be something very similar to that. And we will pass that along through the various committees prior to actually implementing the approval process. It'll go through both the geospatial subcommittee and the fire planning subcommittee.
And one of the reasons I think that this is so awesome is that the other thing it does is it gives you real-time access to this. So if someone was to update your spatial fire planning data, we have this live in WFDSS NextGen right now. So here's the spatial fire planning data for this particular unit. I believe those are subunit overlapping. Okay, so we have some non-overlapping as well. So here's the overlapping and the non-overlapping. So overlapping is management requirements. And you can click on any of these and get information on that particular shape. Here's a cultural use area, admin forest. And then I think we're working on getting some of the verbiage in here as well. the non-overlapping shape, which is what Wes was just showing, the strategic objective shapes. Those are also available in here. And then you can actually copy these shapes and add them in as a strategy shape if you want to use them, or pick them directly off the list. And what makes this awesome is that it's real time, so, or at least near real time. So if you just updated your spatial fire planning data, you will see that updated data in the UI. There will be no lag time. I think that covers most everything I had to cover for today. Lynn, did you have any questions, or does anybody else have any questions on WFDS NextGen and how this is going to fit into the read process?
I do not have any questions, so open to the floor.
Well, one last thing I will say before we adjourn, because it doesn't sound like there's any more questions. We're always looking for feedback from the field. Most of this application has been built and structured the way it is around requests in the past. And if you go to the RDNA website, which I will post this link into chat, here on this link to the inventory, this is all the feedback that we've been given over the past 15 years. Stuff in green, dark green is stuff that's already done. We have this classified out as in development or what phase it's planned for. This is an exhaustive list, but if you just have another piece of feedback you wanted to give us, you can click on that needs and wants form, submit a request to us, and then that will make its way into this spreadsheet. So we kind of build those out a little bit, try and clarify what exactly is being asked for, and whether it's possible or not. And then the other thing I'll mention is that we do user groups periodically, and we have a slew of user groups coming up: spatial inventory, relative risk, and a few others. Those are recorded. Those recordings are posted here if you'd like to watch them, even these old ones, and then you can fill out a feedback form. And I see somebody's got their hand up. Can't see who that is, but is there a question?
Some of our stuff didn't get inspected.
Hey, Sam, this is Pete Irvin. Got my hand up. You got me?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right. Hey, thanks. Good stuff here. I joined a little late, but I wonder if you could give the 30-second version of the timeline from current WFDS over to NextGen WFDS.
Well, that's a complicated question, probably more than 30 seconds. So our current timeline is as fast as we can get there. And that is limited by a bunch of technical hurdles we need to get through. So some of it is getting our production environment stood up. So if you missed the first part, it's actually a pretty big accomplishment. We just got this done this week where the authentication is set up. And so now we have access to our development environment and our QA environment through the interagency wildland fire application portal. And our first step to the switchover, Pete, is going to be we are going to be getting people access to the user acceptance testing environment. And we'll hopefully be doing that within the next 30 days or so. And so you would go through the regular wildland fire application portal, just like you do for WFDSS. And you would click on a WFDS NextGen tile and you'd be able to get in and play around with this system as it is right now. Training environment, we're trying to get the training environment online before the end of the year. And hopefully we will have the production environment online potentially as early next year. But as far as the switch over from classic to NextGen, we want to be really sure about that before we do it, that everything is in place, that we have all the operations and maintenance so that if something happens or there's a system failure, that we have all the resources available to get that system back online for the field. So those are issues we're currently working through. And as soon as we get O&M and production environments stood up, then we will be able to give a really solid timeline for transition. But it's likely that the switchover itself, and I don't know if this is specifically what you're asking about, is going to probably be a pretty hard switchover. And that's related to how we report stuff to Irwin. Only one system. There can only be one production system of WFDSS reporting to Irwin. And so it has to be either classic or NextGen.
I copy, Sam. Thanks. That helps a lot.
Okay. Yep, and there will be several more demos. Like I said, if you guys want to provide feedback or just see more of the application before it's accessible to you, do go to the RDNA website and register for that user group. Before each user group, I go in there and I pick out the new list of everyone, and I do a mass invite to the next user group, so that it shows up in your Outlook calendar or your Google Calendar, as the case may be. Any other questions? Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Sam and Wes. Really appreciate you talking to the resource advisors.
Yep. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out and to myself or Wes, and we'll try and get those questions answered for you.
Hey, and while we have 10 minutes left in our cohort meeting, I'm just going to open it up to any kind of resource advisor question. Anybody there who has a question that maybe the mind of the resource advisors can help answer. All right, everybody's good and nobody has any questions. We'll call it a meeting, and thanks everybody. Everybody go out and have a great, safe fire season.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.